Every morning, before the sun touched the rooftops, a small boy stood at the edge of the train station platform. His skin was dark, his clothes were worn, and his eyes carried more years than his young face could explain. His name was Kofi, a poor African orphan who had never known the warmth of a mother's hug or the voice of a father calling his name. The people in the station saw him every day. Some ignored him, some stared with pity, but none of them knew the truth. Kofi was waiting, not for food, not for coins. He was waiting for someone he had never met. A man from a faded photograph. A man his heart believed was still alive. His father. Kofi had found the photo inside a small wooden box, hidden deep in the pocket of an old shirt left behind in the orphanage. A man standing by a train, holding a child that wasn't him. Yet something in the man's eyes felt familiar, something that made Kofi believe he was still out there, somewhere. So he waited every single day. Kofi made his way to the station. The wooden bench became his seat. The sound of wheels on steel became his lullaby. He watched strangers step off every train. Old men, young women, businessmen, mothers with babies. But not him, not yet. His feet were often cold. His hands trembled from the morning wind, yet he never missed a single train. He waited with the same hope, the same silent prayer whispered to Allah under his breath. He didn't need much. He just needed one face, one voice, one moment to change his life forever. The station guard once threw him out, but Kofi returned the next day. He always returned, because the pull inside his chest was stronger than fear. It was the whisper of something more. Something that made him believe he was not meant to disappear in this world without being found. One evening, the clouds thickened and the sky turned gray. A heavy train screeched into the station, slower than usual. Kofi stood as always. But this time, his heart beat louder. The door of the last car creaked open. A tall man stepped out. His hair was gray. His eyes searched the crowd. Kofi's legs froze. His hand reached into his pocket and held the photo tight. The man stepped closer, and Kofi stopped breathing. The station grew quiet as the man stepped onto the platform. His shoes clicked slowly against the concrete. He moved with purpose, but his face looked lost, like someone chasing a shadow from the past. His coat was long, his shoulders bent. From time, he carried no bags, only a small envelope in his left hand. Kofi's eyes followed him, afraid to blink. He had seen many faces, thousands, but none like this one. The man paused in the middle of the platform and turned his head, as if something called him. His eyes scanned the small crowd. Then they stopped. Not on the mothers, not on the guards. They stopped on Kofi. For a moment, nothing moved. No train, no voice, no wind. Just two souls staring across time and space. The man's lips parted slightly. A single breath escaped, and his knees weakened as if a weight had just returned to him. He took one step forward. Then another. Kofi's fingers tightened around the photo in his pocket. The paper was soft now, worn from years of belief. His heart pounded so loud it echoed in his ears. He could not move, could not speak, could only watch. The man stopped just a few feet away. He didn't smile, he didn't cry, but his eyes told 1,000 stories. And in that silence, Kofi knew. This was not a stranger. This was the face from the photograph. This was the man he had dreamed of. The one his soul had waited for in the cold, in the hunger, in the silence. The man slowly reached into his coat and pulled out something small. A photograph. It was folded, cracked, old. He opened it with trembling hands. There was a woman, smiling, holding a baby in her arms. The photo dropped slightly. His mouth moved slowly, as if speaking to Allah through his heart. His eyes stayed fixed on Kofi. Eyes that remembered what the world had forgotten. But just as Kofi took one small step forward, A sudden shout broke the silence. A guard, rushing through the crowd. Eyes wide, mouth barking words. The man flinched. Kofi's chest tightened. Something was wrong. The guard grabbed the man's arm roughly, shouting about stolen identity, about questions left unanswered. People began to stare. Kofi's hands trembled. The man turned one last time. His eyes locked with Kofi's, filled with sorrow, filled with urgency. And then, just like that, he was pulled away into the shadows of the station, and Kofi was left standing there, alone. Again. The crowd slowly scattered, leaving behind only echoes and dust. Kofi stood frozen, staring at the empty space where the man had just been. His small chest rose and fell quickly, but no tears came. Just silence, heavy, crushing, cold. The photograph inside his pocket felt heavier now. Kofi took one shaky step forward, then another. His feet moved not by choice, but by something deeper, something that refused to let go. He reached the spot where the man had stood. The air still carried his scent, a mixture of dust, rain, and something warm. Like memory. And then Kofi saw it. A torn envelope lying just beneath the bench. The same bench he had sat on for years. It was dirty, slightly open. The wind had not yet taken it. His hands reached down slowly. As he picked it up, something fell out. A letter. The paper was thin, worn by age, and marked by fingerprints. Kofi unfolded it gently, as if touching something sacred. The words were written in shaking strokes. They were not meant for him. Yet somehow, every line spoke to his soul. It began with a name Kofi had never heard before, but one that echoed deep inside him. It spoke of a son lost. A son searched for. A boy born under a wide African sky, taken by a storm of sorrow, left in the hands of others when the world turned cruel. A boy who might still be waiting. Somewhere, the last line was stained, as if a tear had touched it before the ink dried. And below it, a signature. Not full, not clear, but enough to see. The same name written on the back of the photograph Kofi had carried all this time. It was him, the man who had been pulled away. Kofi clutched the letter to his chest. His breath shook. His legs collapsed, and he sat on the cold ground, surrounded by footsteps that didn't care. But inside his chest, something had changed. He was not crazy. He was not foolish. The man had come. He had searched. He had written. He had stood there, just inches away, and now he was gone. But Kofi knew the letter was not an end. It was a trail, a piece of a map, drawn in pain and silence, and he was ready to follow it. As the sky darkened and the last train pulled away, Kofi rose from the ground. His clothes were torn, his hands dirty, but his eyes burned with a new fire, because for the first time in his life, he wasn't just waiting, he was searching. The city was no place for a child like Kofi. The streets were wide and loud, filled with rushing cars and cold faces. But none of that mattered. He walked with the letter tucked safely beneath his shirt, and the torn envelope folded inside the lining of his coat. Every step he took was guided by something greater than fear, the silent pull of truth. He didn't know where to start. He had no address, no full name, just the edge of a story and the trace of a memory. But then, he remembered the watch. The man at the station had worn a silver watch. Kofi had seen it clearly. It wasn't new. It was scratched. The kind worn by someone who didn't care for show, only meaning. Etched on its face was something strange. A small symbol. Kofi had memorized it in a second. A tree, with roots curling deep beneath the numbers. So he wandered. For days, he asked no one. He begged from no one, but his eyes watched. In alleys, in parks, in train stations, he looked for the watch. The man, the tree, until one day, he saw it. In a pawn shop window. Behind cracked glass and dusty rings, the silver watch, same scratches. Same tree. His hands pressed against the glass, breath fogging the window. He stepped inside, heart pounding like thunder. The shop was dim. Old shelves, rusted locks. A man behind the counter looked up, uninterested. Kofi walked straight to the case and pointed. The man squinted, nodded slowly, said nothing. He reached under the counter and pulled out a crumpled card. Kofi took it. No name. Just an address. And a single word stamped in red ink. Unclaimed. That night, Kofi slept in the stairwell of a closed factory. Rain tapped the roof above him, and rats crept nearby. But he didn't notice. His eyes stayed fixed on the card. He would go wherever it led, because someone had left the watch behind. Someone who wore it every day, until the day he met a boy at a train station, and something inside him broke. Kofi closed his eyes. He saw the man again, the way he looked at him, like a door had opened after years of darkness. And now, Kofi held the key. But as dawn broke and Kofi stood to leave, a shadow moved from across the street. A tall figure, watching him. Waiting. The morning air was heavy with fog as Kofi stepped onto the cracked pavement, the card clutched tightly in his hand. The ink had begun to smear from the rain, but the address was still clear enough. A long street name, a faded number. Somewhere beyond the factories and the walls covered in forgotten posters. He walked fast. Each step carried more weight. Each corner turned was a prayer to Allah that he was not too late, that the man had not disappeared again, swallowed by this endless city of strangers. As he moved deeper into the neighborhood, the buildings changed. Bricks replaced concrete. The air smelled of metal and coal. Windows were broken. Doors chained. The kind of place where memories went to die. But then he saw it. The number painted on a door, barely hanging on its hinges. Kofi stopped. For a moment, the world stood still. He stepped forward and pressed his hand to the wood. The door creaked open, without resistance. Inside, it was dark. Dust floated in the air like whispers. A table, a broken chair, a blanket on the floor. And then, the photograph. Sitting alone on the table, the same one. The man, the woman, the baby. Next to it, an envelope, thick, sealed, his name written across it in a hand that shook. He reached for it slowly, but before he could touch it, the floor creaked behind him. Kofi turned sharply. A figure stood in the doorway, not the man. From the station. Someone else, older. Dressed in black, eyes hidden beneath a wide hat. He said nothing, just stared at Kofi, then glanced at the letter, then back at Kofi. The silence was colder than the wind. The figure took one step inside. Then another, and without a sound, he reached out his hand. Kofi backed away slowly, but the figure kept coming. From beneath his coat, he pulled out something small, a second photo, and in it, Kofi saw the same man, but this time, he wasn't alone. He was surrounded by people in uniforms. He was handcuffed, his face bruised. A date was scribbled in the corner, a day that hadn't happened yet. Kofi's breath caught in his throat. The figure stepped closer and whispered the one word Kofi feared the most. Run! Asterisk. His feet pounded against wet pavement, lungs burning with each breath. The photo stayed buried in his pocket, the sealed envelope pressed tight against his chest. Behind him, the streets twisted like a maze. Every alley looked the same. Every shadow felt like it carried eyes. But he didn't stop, not until the buildings gave way to silence. A stretch of old warehouses stood ahead, half sunk into the earth. Their windows were boarded, their doors chained. But one had a light, just one, flickering behind a crooked curtain. Kofi moved toward it. His body ached, his clothes soaked. But his soul was louder than the fear. He pushed open the door. It creaked, like it hadn't been touched in years, Inside, the air was thick with dust and memory. A map covered the wall, filled with pins, lines, circles, photos, some blurred, some marked with black ink. In the center of it all, a single headline from a newspaper, yellow with age. Man escapes from prison after 13 years. Beneath it, the same face. The man from the station. Kofi's knees weakened. He stepped closer, and beside the map, he found a journal. Pages filled with names, dates, and one word repeated again and again. He opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, written in the same trembling hand. It was long, painful, full of things no child should ever have to read. A confession. The man had been arrested wrongly. Accused of something he didn't do. Betrayed by someone he once trusted. Locked away while his family was torn apart. His wife died. His son disappeared. And when he was finally released, he had nothing but guilt. And a photograph. That was why he came to the station every day, until one day. He saw the boy. He saw Kofi. But something had gone wrong. Someone else had followed him. Someone who never wanted the truth to come out. Someone who had watched from the shadows and waited for the day the man would make a mistake. And now, Kofi was caught in in something much bigger than just a reunion. The floor creaked again. Kofi turned, heart frozen. This time, it wasn't the man in black. It was someone else. Taller, younger, carrying a badge and a gun. He looked at Kofi with tired eyes and whispered, "They're coming." His feet pounded against wet pavement, lungs burning with each breath. The photo stayed buried in his pocket. The sealed envelope pressed tight against his chest. Behind him, the streets twisted like a maze. Every alley looked the same. Every shadow felt like it carried eyes. But he didn't stop, not until the buildings gave way to silence. A stretch of old warehouses stood ahead, half sunk into the earth. Their windows were boarded, their doors chained. But one had a light, just one, flickering behind a crooked curtain. Kofi moved toward it. His body ached, his clothes soaked. But his soul was louder than the fear. He pushed open the door. It creaked, like it hadn't been touched in years. Inside, the air was thick with dust and memory. A map covered the wall, filled with pins, lines, circles, photos, some blurred, some marked with black ink. In the center of it all, a single headline from a newspaper, yellow with age. Man escapes from prison after 13 years. Beneath it, the same face. The man from the station. Kofi's knees weakened. He stepped closer, and beside the map, he found a journal. Pages filled with names, dates, and one word repeated again and again. He opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, written in the same trembling hand. It was long, painful, full of things no child should ever have to read. A confession. The man had been arrested wrongly. Accused of something he didn't do. Betrayed by someone he once trusted. Locked away while his family was torn apart. His wife died. His son disappeared. And when he was finally released, he had nothing but guilt. And a photograph. That was why he came to the station every day, until one day. He saw the boy. He saw Kofi. But something had gone wrong. Someone else had followed him. Someone who never wanted the truth to come out. Someone who had watched from the shadows and waited for the day the man would make a mistake. And now, Kofi was caught in in something much bigger than just a reunion. The floor creaked again. Kofi turned, heart frozen. This time, it wasn't the man in black. It was someone else. Taller, younger, carrying a badge and a gun. He looked at Kofi with tired eyes and whispered, "They're coming."